Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC TV. I'm excited about this episode. We have Jonathan Alexander from vmSight here to show us their amazing solution for sort of monitoring and just getting down and deep within virtual environments. So I don't want to steal Jonathan's thunder. He'll tell us all about what we're looking at on the screen in front of, or what you guys are looking at in front of you, and all that jazz. So let's just dive straight into it. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be with us today, Jonathan.
Thanks, Doug. Glad to be here.
Hey, thank you. So, okay, before we dive in too deep in it, before we get into actually showing off the technology, which is what I love about these videos, I do have a couple quick questions for you. And as always, they're pretty easy questions. The first one is, who are you?
Well, I am Jonathan Alexander. I'm president and co-founder of vmSight. And prior to vmSight, I've worked at a number of software companies. I actually started in software development, working on software with Michael Crichton, author-director Michael Crichton, and I've worked at Lotus and had a startup that I helped founded called RadNet, and RadNet was purchased by a company called Epiphany, where I was prior to coming to vmSight.
Very cool, very cool. So let's talk a bit about vmSight. Who is vmSight? What is your guys' goal over there?
Well, vmSight uses very unique technology that we're going to be able to show everybody today to help provide a new level of visibility into the virtual environment. We focus on providing visibility at the user and application activity level, and we use our capabilities for a number of solutions that help you better manage your virtual environment. A lot of our focus is on virtual desktops and the emerging interest and increasing deployment of virtual desktops and virtual desktop infrastructure. Primarily, we help people better manage performance, reliability, and compliance when they're deploying VDI.
Well, perfect. Okay, enough about all that. Enough talking, right? Let's get into showing. So in front of us, we're looking at the vmSight Center, and I imagine this is your management console. I know it is, but I imagine it is, for those of you out there that haven't seen it.
It's our management console. vmSight Center is deployed as a virtual appliance, and the interface is we're gonna take a look through it in a number of and as we walk through the demo, but the interface is all accessed through a browser. It's a DHTML kind of interface, so it's very easy to use. And this is where you do all your central policy management and all your reporting, set up your alerts. You can also integrate our data with a number of other systems.
Very cool, very cool. Well, let's get straight to this demo. Let's get to you showing us off this amazing vmSight solution that you guys have. So what do we do first? First of all, as you had said, this is a virtual appliance, so we just need to go out to the vmSight site and download the virtual appliance and upload that into our VMware environment, and away we go. But once that is uploaded and we start it up, what do we do?
Well, what I'd like to do is kind of demonstrate, by starting at the virtual desktop, our unique technology. And the thing that I want to start with is explaining what our connector ID capability is and why that's useful and how that helps you, especially when you're doing virtual desktops. And along the way, we'll kind of get to see the different facets of the product and begin to understand the kind of visibility that vmSight provides. So what I'm doing here to start, Doug, is that I've got a Windows XP guest set up that we're going to call our virtual desktop in this environment. And I'm just running VMware Workstation locally here for demo purposes. So what I want to do is I'm going to start on this desktop, and this is a pretty clean Windows XP image, so there's very little been installed on it. And what I want to do is I'm just going to use the desktop now to perform a couple of functions. So let's say that I'll open up the browser here, and I'm running everything on my laptop, so a couple of things won't go too fast. inside of VMware Workstation here, but let's open up the browser and let's go somewhere. And let's do something else. Let's just open up WinSCP to create a different kind of, some different application activity. And I'm going to run a login. And so now I've done a couple of things from the virtual desktop, okay? So what I'm going to do in just a second is we're going to go back into vmSight, and we're going to see how we can see the information about what users are doing on and from their virtual desktops, okay? But while I'm doing that, one of the things that I hadn't done yet is I hadn't installed our connector ID key on the virtual desktop.
Real quick, what is this connector ID? This is like your agent software?
Yes, connector ID comes as agent software, and there's a variety of ways you can install it on virtual desktops. You can use any push mechanism. You can actually install it as part of your machine templates, so that when you create your machines from your templates, the connector ID keys are automatically included. Or you can run an install through a normal interface, which is what I'm going to do here for the demo purposes. I'm just going to kick off the install. Connector ID is also available. You can actually embed it even in thin clients. So you can embed it in a Weiss terminal or an HP NeoWare terminal, and that'll give you the ability to track activity from end to end, all the way from the terminal to the virtual desktop and back to the servers that are accessed from the virtual desktop.
Very nice. But in playing with your solution, I'm not required to have this connector ID on the machine. It's just going to give me more information. Your solution will go and find information about what's going on in their environment, the customer's environment, without this, correct?
Absolutely. And in fact, as we start the demo here, we're going to go in and see the information that we saw that we were able to gather without connector ID involved at all. So the thing that, and part of what we'll see here is what does connector ID give you? Now, we call it connector ID because we named it after caller ID. So connector ID does for computer networks what caller ID does for the phone system, and that is that we provide a way to track users and machines, and that's what we're going to see in just a minute. But to your point, let's go into our vmSight Center now. Let's go back into it, and let's see what we can find. So I'm on the real clock here in this machine. So let me just say, let's look for activity from 3:15, back just a couple minutes ago or a minute ago. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for user and desktop activity. I'm going to run this report. Now, so what I'm seeing is that I'm from what we call the monitoring station, which is a separate virtual appliance that you put on each host that you want to monitor. We're monitoring all the activity to, from, and between all the virtual machines. So in this case, we don't have connector ID at all. So all of our users are showing up as unknown. And our machines, we don't actually know their names. We just know them by IP addresses. Okay. So this is the kind of information that we get if you don't use connector ID. Now, what I do get is, in fact, I happen to, in this case, know that the IP address of that desktop we were using is this guy right here, 192.168.927. And so I can actually see some information about the cumulative activity, including the amount of data transferred, the response times. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drill in to see what were the actual applications used from this virtual desktop and how much were they used. So this report is coming back, and maybe I didn't quite have enough of a timeline there because I'm seeing the WinSCP data here,
yep.
But I'm not seeing the browser data. let's just go back and we'll give it one more shot and see if we can pick up that browser data as well. There it is. So now we see that, here was my Google. There was some other activity, IGMP broadcast activity that was being done probably by the WinXP operating system. So I can see all the detail of what's going on, and we can look a little later at some of the kind of reports I can get from this even without connector ID, and I can use this information to help me understand what applications are running, how much activity is going on, and that information can be used for a number of our customers use it for sprawl control, for identifying what applications are running where and how much they're being used. You can use it for better capacity forecasting. We have a way to provide billing information. So there's a lot of usefulness of the system even without connector ID.
Very cool. Very cool.
But what I'd like to do now is let's get out of here and let's go back to our desktop where we've installed connector ID now. Let's finish this up. And so now this desktop now has the connector ID key installed. And just to round out our virtual desktop scenario, let me actually do a remote desktop connection to the virtual desktop. So now I'm running my remote desktop client from my actual laptop outside of the virtual environment. And in fact, just for grins, let's go to something that I know will fail to start with. So I tried to connect to a virtual machine in the environment. That failed because I connected to the wrong one.
Okay.
We'll see how we can detect that back in our system in a second. Now let's connect to the actual virtual desktop. So now I'm just like I would in a real VDI environment. From my terminal, I've brought up the virtual desktop. And now this is that same image that we were logged into before with the same icons on my desktop. And now let's just do the same things. So I'm going to pop open the browser here. And let's just go back to Google for a second.
Why aren't you going to DABCC.com?
Oh, I'm sorry. That is always the first place I go. So let's go there.
And it's probably slow.
And all the slowness is on my side, absolutely.
No,
all right, let's just let that guy go. And let's bring up...
Google's extremely quick because it's front-ended by those beautiful Citrix NetScalers.
I think they just buy up land, don't they?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Problem loading page. Okay, that's not you. I promise you, that is me.
No problem.
See if Google's okay here. All right, so there we got Google.
Okay.
So now we've done a couple things through our remote connection. And so let's exit out of our remote desktop connection. And now let's go back into vmSight. So one of the main problems that we find people will have is when they're doing VDI is that they're sharing desktops among users. They may be sharing terminals as well. And everything is getting assigned dynamically, often sometimes by a broker. And IP addresses are getting assigned randomly, day by day, machine by machine. So, one of the problems is when somebody tells you that they're having an issue, like their desktop is slow, one of the first things that can be really hard is figuring out what machine were they on, what machine were they using, right? Yeah. So let's see a couple things that just happened just because we installed connector ID on our virtual desktop. Well, the first thing is that the user who logged in, who was unknown to us before, actually got automatically registered into the vmSight system. So you see here that at 3:33, this user DK was created. Now, you can actually integrate with your Active Directory or LDAP system and resolve these Windows IDs back to that system, which would also let you take advantage of the groups defined in your Active Directory for policy and reporting purposes. But this registration here happened automatically just the second that DK, that user, logged in to that virtual desktop. He automatically got registered.
So that's very cool. So for example, I could go in and say, the help desk gets a call from John Brown, and John Brown says, well, I'm having so much troubles. Well, what are you having troubles with? I don't know. They could just come in here and put in John Brown's user address or user ID, login ID, and they would see all the information that about his recent traffic and things of that nature. Correct?
Exactly. You can find the exact machine. If you use connector ID at the terminal, you could find the exact terminal he was accessing his virtual image from, and then with vmSight, you can find out what was going on with that virtual machine, including what was he connecting to. So when he says, my virtual desktop is slow, you don't really know. I mean, we all know. Any of us who have worked in data centers and the IT industry, we know that the users may think they know what's causing the problem. We may even have guesses, but it's often wrong, right?
Yeah,
and you really
absolutely
need that visibility. But exactly, connector ID lets you figure out which machine and he was on and what he was doing. So, and let's go look at that in one sec. The other thing I'll show you before we did that is the other thing that just happened here at 3:33 is that machine actually registered into our system as well. Now, the really interesting thing here with connector ID is that this machine is probably set up DHCP. In fact, this guy is. He's going to get a different IP address every day, but we're not going to track him anymore by IP address because we've got connector ID. We're going to track him with our connector ID. So we're going to know every day what that same machine is doing, and we'll be able to track it historically.
Well, you could use this for almost security purposes also. So if you went and had like a B2B solution or contractors coming in, you could really sit there and monitor and make sure that they're not trying to make attacks on your network and things like that too. And if they were, you could trace them back.
That's a very big use of our product. A number of our customers use it for user tracking, either because of security concerns or that they have particular compliance regulations. Hospitals have HIPAA regulations, financial institutions have PCI, GLBA regulations, and being able to track the users. It's actually one of the real advantages of VDI is that, if you do VDI right, and if you use vmSight with your VDI, you actually end up with a much stronger solution from a compliance and security perspective than you probably have with your physical system. So let's go in now. Let's see what we actually got, which is, let me go back now and we'll say, okay, we probably, I don't know what time we really started that data, so let's just do back to 3:25 p.m. And let's go into our users and desktops, but let's do this exact scenario that you described, Doug. Let's say that DK called us, right?
Okay.
And he said, I'm having a problem. So what do you do? Well, what you can do is, let's come in here, and I'm going to say, okay, I need to find DK. All right, one of the things of our system is you could have hundreds or thousands of users, right?
Yep.
So everything we've implemented is type ahead. So I do a type ahead. I say, okay, there's DK, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. He told me he had a problem 10 minutes ago. Let me run the report, and voila, now I see there was DK and there was the machine he was using.
Interesting.
Right? And now I can start to drill down to see, well, he said it was slow, so let me see what was going on from that machine. And in this case, now we see, okay, there's his WinSCP, and he was going out to the internet, and we can begin to look at the performance statistics of those. The coming release of vmSight will let you drill in to a lot more information about the processes running inside of that desktop, and as well as the disk activity of that desktop. So I can begin to, with Connector ID, I'm able to pin down what machine we're talking about and begin to see all the activity so I can diagnose the problem and figure out what the issue is and solve it.
That's very cool.
Now the other thing I can do, remember I did that RDP, right? So let's go in here real quick, and let's say some people are saying they're having trouble connecting. Well, then what I can do is I can always come in here and do something like this, which is I can now say, okay, let's find RDP traffic.
That's very cool.
And run the report. And now what we see is, okay, there were a couple of this. In this case, these are the destinations that I'm seeing in this report. So these were the desktops that somebody tried to connect to, and I can see right here, incomplete connections, that there were connection attempts made to this, this machine that failed. These were the RDP ones that somebody was having trouble with, and I can drill down to find out who were the actual terminals that attempted to connect. Right now I'm seeing these as unknown, but if I put Connector ID out at the terminal, I'd even be able to see the info about the specific terminal and even the specific user who was having the connection problem. So, that's some of the power of our system. And then, as you mentioned before, we have a number of facilities. We have the capability to not only do this interactive reporting, but we have a whole set of report templates that are fully customizable, and you can come into our system and schedule reports to run and be delivered on a time basis. So I can come in here and I can say, I have a report that might show me problems on my virtual desktops or sprawl. I could say run that every week. Run it Monday morning at 6 a.m. and email me the result, and I can put my email address in here and have the report come to me. And we have a lot of different reports. Some examples are, and you can actually browse through these on our websites. We provide activity trend reports. We have sprawl reports. This is a particularly interesting report that shows you how much each application is being used and when was the last time it was used, how many users are accessing the application. We have a number of compliance reports. So we have specific reports that doesn't work too well, huh?
No.
Well, that can be edited out.
I was going to say, let's edit that out.
And we also have sprawl report. Okay, I'll get back to it here. We also have even billing reports. So we can show you the activity, and if you assign charge plans to activity, we can do billing by user for the use of the virtual environment. So there's a lot of different ways to use the data that we gather and provide, as well as being able to export that data to other applications or systems that might use it.
Very neat, very neat. So I can see that your connector, the agent that's out there. Let's say somebody or you have a new version of that. Can we essentially update all the different workstations and thin clients and devices out there essentially?
Its connector ID keys have an auto update feature. So if you turn on, there's a switch inside of the vmSight Center where you can manage your connector ID keys, and you can simply come in here and tell the system whether you want them to auto update. You can see by default they're set to automatically update, and what they'll do is they will simply check back with the vmSight Center on a regular basis. You can configure how often they check back, and if there's an update available, they'll automatically update themselves. So auto update is available. You can also control connector ID keys if you have a patch update system set up. Your normal patch update services for your virtual desktops can work just as well.
Perfect. What about updating the virtual appliance itself? You know, as you mentioned, you're definitely always working to make this thing better and add more features and, you know, and all that jazz, right? Let's say you come out, because it's a virtual appliance, let's say you come out with a new version tomorrow. What is required to upgrade this thing? Do we have to export, import? How does that work?
You don't need to export, import. There's actually, for the vmSight Center, we have a console command line interface. You would log into the command line interface and you run a single command, which we call update latest. What update latest does is it reaches out to the vmSight site and it will update the vmSight Center with the latest. Once you've done that, when you can come into the vmSight Center, and so there was no need to export, import, you have the ability to manage all your monitoring stations here. And we have a very simple facility for selecting either all the monitoring stations or a group of them, and then one click, you can tell them to just update. You don't have to go to every single monitoring station. If you want to control the updates to vmSight Center yourself more granularly, we do have the capability to do that. So if you don't want to take our latest release, let's say you're kind of keeping 4 or 5 versions behind us for some reason, you can control that as well. But still, it's a single upgrade of the vmSight Center virtual appliance, and then it's push button to push that out to the rest of the system.
Very cool. Well, you showed us some of the reports. You showed us basically going out and all the information you're collecting from, for the clients out there, whatever they may be. I also see policies. What are the policies, and what do they do?
Well, policies is a way to define certain service levels, access levels, or charge plans that you want to have us monitor for essentially for the network activity that we're seeing in the virtual environment. So these are policies related to the activity to or from or between any virtual machines. So I can set up rules here, such as this one right here, let's pick this one right here, that says people in my finance group, where this group would be defined in my Active Directory, they're allowed to use a specific set of desktops to access the finance application. I'm going to authorize them to do this during the work week. I have a particular service level, which means particular response time that I expect to deliver for the finance application. I have a particular charge plan I'm assigning, and I want vmSight to log all the data for this activity. So those are the kinds of rules we have. They're very easy to edit, and you can set up different rules for different parts of your virtual environment. You don't have to use every aspect of this. So if you want to use vmSight to monitor your compliance and your access to sensitive systems, but you don't want to use us for billing or charge plans, then you just simply don't use those parts of the rules. But it's a very easy interface to come in here and change the different elements of rules and create new rules. And once you create these rules, then they get pushed out to the monitoring stations, and the monitoring stations check these rules in real time for each virtual host that they're monitoring, and then they report the activity back to the vmSight Center. So that is how the policies work and what they're used for.
Very cool. Well, Jonathan, I like to keep these podcasts right about 30, 40 minutes, and we're coming up upon 30 minutes. But, of course, there might be more to see, so I'll throw it at you. What else would you like to show us? Is there anything else?
I think we showed the main things, Doug. I hope everybody got a bit of an idea of what we can provide and some of the data we can see. And I would invite folks folks who are interested in seeing more to our website, you can actually, as you said, you can download the product and install it for free. You can also request other information and request a demo through our website.
Well, perfect. Well, perfect. And, of course, that website is?
www.vmsight.com.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, Jonathan, I really appreciate your time. I've quite enjoyed this. I've been playing with the software for a bit, but, I've actually learned a few things today, so that's neat. I'm going to go back and try those out on my internal deployment of vmSight. So it's always fun, always fun. Again, I really appreciate your time today, and I'll give you the last word.
Thanks, Doug. I really always appreciate talking to you, and let me know what you find when you try that software a little more in your environment.
I definitely will. As you know, I definitely will.
Good.
So that being said, Jonathan, again, thank you so much. And as always, thanks everyone out there for listening to DABCC TV.